Hey everybody, we just have a couple minutes for introductions. My friend Hilko, big congratulations, passed the TOGAF tests, and this is a really significant certification for data architecture. Is that correct?
Officially an enterprise architecture thing, right? And the data is
Amazing.
part of that.
Even more broad and impressive.
Yes,
Congratulations on that.
thank you.
We're here today to study for the Certified Data Management Professional exam. Specifically, I will be reading chapter 7, which is data security. Of course, you're free to use this time however you want. Then we'll discuss the chapter for about 10 minutes. Sometimes it runs over if the discussion is good, and we'll just keep it going. I've got my copy of the DMBOK here, and I just wanted to show this in case it's useful for people who are preparing for the exam. I did just want to say, I used the physical copy when I took the test. Other people have said that that's silly and that the optimal way to do it is to use the ebook because you can use Control F to search for specific terms. Your mileage may vary, but ideally you'll know the material and you won't be looking everything up. I just wanted to say this was my approach. And I put all the sticky notes on the right-hand side of the book. That way I knew with the book facing up how to find the different things. I had a wide sticky note for the first page of the chapters and little sticky notes with text that said important content like diagrams or lists that I knew that I would want to look for. I did just want to highlight that because I mentioned it on another call like this and people said that that was a useful point of feedback. I'm going to go ahead and get us started with our first session of deep work. Again, the topic will be data security. So at least that's where I am in my reading. Feel free to use the time however is the most helpful for you, but we'll come back in 19 minutes and 44 seconds, and then we'll discuss takeaways from what we read. Our first discussion period. Does anybody want to share a key takeaway from their reading? I can also go ahead and get started just so we're all on the same page, some information about the chapter. We are looking at data security, and it is 6% of the content on the exam. There's a lot in this chapter, and obviously it's very important for the survival of your organization to not mess this up. But there's only 6 out of 100 questions, give or take, that you can expect to see when you go into the fundamentals exam. Data security is focused on this idea of reducing risk and encouraging the growth of the business in a way that is safe. It encapsulates the policies and procedures designed to reduce risks and protect the organization. It also relates to data privacy and ensuring that data confidentiality is maintained and data breaches do not occur, and that access rights are appropriate given the level of authority of the team members or contractors who might have access to various systems within the organization. And then as you go through the book, it talks about the ways to get started. So I thought this would be a good thing for us to discuss as well in the session. Basically, the first step that is recommended by the DMBOK and also by the US National Institute of Standards and Technology is to identify and classify sensitive data assets. And the level of rigor for this process will obviously depend on your industry or your organization. So if you're selling blue jeans, then it's not as important as if you're selling credit data, as if you're Equifax or TransUnion. And that's why it's so concerning when these organizations have breaches. So that's the first step. It's kind of cool because this builds on the importance of having that enterprise data architecture in place. So the second step is to locate sensitive data across the enterprise so that you're aware of it. Determine how each asset needs to be protected, and then identify how that information interacts with business processes. I figured hopefully that's enough to get us started with a conversation about other aspects of data security, or if folks have any questions, this is a good time to raise those.
I can share an observation with you if you want.
That'd be great.
Security is you think about it to avoid breaches, right? You want to keep hackers out, stuff like that. And one of the things I noticed that I'm looking at the TOGAF definition, which is quite similar as the one from the DMBOK, and they're always talking about risk. Risk and security is always those two together. Risk is what if the event happens that we lose all our data? That's step one. And then keep hackers out is the second part of data security. In the beginning, it was really confusing for me because when I think about security, it's about keeping viruses out and keep people out from stealing your stuff, right?
Are you saying the standpoint of negative visualization is the thing that's confusing to you versus
Well,
having a positive, defensive mindset?
it never crossed my mind to also include risk in combination with security because managing risk is what if events, right? What if something bad happens? How do we deal with that stuff? And security, in my vision, is more how do we build a wall so people can't enter our sensitive stuff?
Yeah, I guess it depends on whether you take the standpoint of like, it is inevitable that mistakes will be made and building that into your understanding of how to design these processes. Like, have you heard of the Swiss cheese model of having multiple layers of defense? So if somebody finds a flash drive in the parking lot and plugs it into their laptop, that it can't connect to the enterprise system and take everything down.
Yeah, maybe it's because I'm more from a technical background, because risk management on itself is like a profession, right?
Yeah,
And you can do risk management without security, but you can't do security without risk management.
good observation. Oh, someone had their hand up earlier, so I want to make sure we get to you if you had a question.
Yeah. Hi, all. How are you? It's a pleasure to meet everyone in this meeting. I have a question related to critical data assets. Now, we have a requirement from regulatory to classify the critical data assets in the company. So I have a simple question based on your experience. Shall we classify the assets if the data stored inside of it, or we will classify the assets for the data that access through? For example, if we have a PC that connects to ARB system, the PC itself doesn't store or save any personal data of employees. However, through this PC, I can access ARB system, which I can see everything there. So I was confused a little bit based on what I will classify the assets and based on what.
I
Okay,
would classify the user of the computer, maybe.
interesting.
Sounds a bit weird, but we had the Corona database in the Netherlands here, and they needed many people to take care of the calls and put in all the sensitive data from the users, of all the citizens, and people just stole it. They stole it, they sold vaccination proof and certificates. They just took pictures with their phones and stuff like that. So then the question is the data safe on the computer? Maybe. But is the user a safe user, right? So just my 2 cents.
This is Rao. This is the first time I'm attending one of these sessions. Real pleasure to meet you all.
Welcome.
I think there are two parts to that, right? The data asset itself is what pieces of data are important to you. And this kind of ties back to what Hilco's question about. Why talk about risk management? Because if we're going to secure everything in the enterprise, that's going to be super expensive. That's the reason why having a sense of which is more risky or which can cause more damage gives us a prioritized list of how do we go about securing the assets, right? So from Osama's question, I would say the critical data assets are the things that the data that needs to be secured. But around that, you also have the things that you need to tag, like Hilco was saying, who has access to it, what devices can access to it, and then you have to have security profiles around them or practices around them to be able to say, okay, not only have I identified the critical data assets, but I have taken care of the access pathways to that data and that I have a plan to secure them, or risk mitigation plans if something happens. Like Hilco says, if somebody's going to take a picture of that, how are you going to prevent that? Those kinds of things. I don't know if that helps, but I think that would be my view, to look at both the data assets. In terms of core data assets, I would only talk about the data, but then the access mechanisms need to be looked into also and say, what are the risks around that? Who has access to it? How can they be accessed? Can third parties violate those access methods to be able to get to them? All those kinds of things, I think, around that you need to think about.
Yeah, I might point you to the 4 A's of data security. Those are access, audit, authentication, and authorization. And so maybe that's a good place to start thinking about how to classify the critical access data as across those 4 dimensions.
Yeah, thank you, guys. It's beneficial. I was in identity nexus management before, so I know your language when you talk about the authentication and authorization of accesses. And now, since I have been moved to data privacy and data governance, I think it's going to be helpful for me as well. So thank you for this.
So we have just a few minutes left in this Pomodoro session. So let's go ahead and get a little bit of silent reading going. And then if people think of other questions, then we can jump into those during our next discussion break.
This is Naresh. I didn't understand the fifth one under the 4A's entitlement. Is the sum of the total all the data elements that are expected to a user by a single access authorization decision? Any comments? It's page 217, the 4A's access, audit, authentication, authorization. there is an entitlement at the bottom. So this entitlement is all the four above steps. It is an individual task or a different entity.
The text above this mentions that entitlement is like sometimes added recently. Maybe it's like a update to the previous framework, which was the 4A's. Now we've got 4A's and an E. My understanding of E is that it's the sum total of everything that the user is entitled to access. So it's like an outcome of the 4A's: access, audit, authentication, and authorization. It seems like inventory of all the data exposed by each entitlement is necessary in determining regulatory and confidentiality requirements for entitlement decisions. If folks want to jump in with stories from their experience, that would be welcome.
Yeah, this is Rao. I think what that's referring to is, suppose you have your access rule and a person needs access to somebody's name, let's say, or customer number or something. But your access mechanisms are such that if they get access to the customer name or number, which they need, then they're suddenly also getting access to their address and their account balance and the products purchased and all the other kinds of things. That comes into the entitlement, meaning your access and authorization policy is essentially entitling them to a whole bunch of stuff that maybe they need, maybe they don't need. And that's where you need to make a distinction to say, okay, well, if I gave them this access and authorization, are they getting too much more than they need? And especially in healthcare, it's very important, right? Billing people may need access to certain kinds of information, but not everything. So that's where entitlement says, do they really need this? Do they have entitlement to this stuff, or am I giving them more than what they're entitled to? And then you have to break down or break up your access and authorization mechanisms, and whereby there's more of a finer granularity of access so that they only get what they really need, but not stuff that they really don't need. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very interested in the data masking, and one of the ways I found very doable is data encryption. I used Python and I did encrypt some data, but I don't know how to approach the people who work in the database to apply that mechanism on some high sensitive data, such as a customer name or a customer phone number. Like how to approach them and tell them, I need to apply this methodology on your database. Have anyone has an experience in applying this?
Can I jump in real quick?
Yes.
It kind of depends where you want to encrypt it, right? Does it need to be encrypted inside the database or while it is moving? Or are there special moments that it should be invisible to the outside world?
For me, I want this type of data when I extract it in a report to be encrypted. But at the same time, on the database, when someone wants to view this data, who is entitled to view it, is capable to view it without asking for decrypting this data again, because it will lead to lagging the operation and it will consume a lot of time to decrypt this data again. So is it doable to do some such mirror database to the main one? Like there is synchronization between the database and the mirror database where I extract the reports from?
Yes. And the thing is, I think that how does the user access the data? I assume it's via an application that could take care of the entitlement in this case. And if they have direct access to the actual database, then you need to encrypt it inside the database. And you can encrypt your data inside the fields, but then you have some overhead when you want to access the data. You have to decrypt it on the fly, especially when you have a search query and everything is encrypted. You can't just enter a string of text and hope for the best, because every field has to be decrypted in order to search inside it, right?
Yeah. But what if I have an analytics team who works on these data to analyze it? Yes, they have the authority to view the data, but for anyone else, when they view this data, I want it to be encrypted. So that's why I came out with this idea of making a mirror database where if anyone wants to extract report from the system, automatically they talk to this mirror database and they get the report encrypted. But if anyone want to analyze the data, who is authorized to analyze the data itself, yes, they get a full view without needing to decrypt that data. Is that applicable in a system? It's just an idea, and it came to me while studying this chapter. I applied it through Python, and it did work. I was able to encrypt and decrypt the data, and now just to deliver it to the IT and apply it.
It sounds okay to me. Not sure what other people think.
Okay.
I mean, it's a practical thing, right? If it works and it's not slowing down with huge amount of data, then why not just go for it? If you can separating the things is always a good idea, right? In this case, because
Yes.
encrypted versus unencrypted data and mix it can get messy.
True. I agree.
So when you have a separate thing just for your projects and you can keep things in sync using an event streamer or database sync or some kind of connector that
Yeah.
encrypts it as soon as it enters the database, you should be fine, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, one solution is that you can create a view of that tables and remove all those personal data columns from that and give it to the analytics team. And
Sounds
access to the actual table, you should not give to the analytics team or report team.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, are you looking for encryption or are you looking for prevention of access to certain user groups? If it is prevention of that data at all, I would not go to encryption as opposed to just doing a view that restricts for certain access levels.
Yeah, it's mixed between both. It's kind of prevention for who's not authorized to view this type of data. But at the same time, what if they want to analyze other columns on the same tables of data? For example, if they want to see the name of the customer, but I want to encrypt their phone numbers, their transactions, you know what I mean? It has to be encrypted because it's very high sensitive data according to the DMBOK. But I kind of gathered an idea from what you have said, and I will approach with the IT of the mechanism of how to apply it on the system. Thank you.
I think views are a lot more flexible and cheap. You can create a whole bunch of them based on different levels of what people need. Encryption from a management perspective, for example, if you do a separate thing with encryption, then you have the data integrity or syncing that Hilko was talking about. That becomes a very important issue. Encryption itself has its own technical cost to it that you need to manage because there is user support costs. Once you start encrypting, then people come back to you and say, hey, I'm having trouble decrypting this. I lost my password, or like, I need to change my password for decrypting this. So there's a whole bunch of what is called technical debt that you are including or adding when you do something like encryption when it's not needed. Whereas if you do just a whole bunch of views, that they're not very expensive, right? Everything is there and everybody for in a particular context gets only what they need to get. And views are very powerful in terms of slicing and dicing data for different access and credential purposes.
Yes, I agree with you, RB. And even implementing this encryption is a big overhead for the IT departments. Views are either row level, column level restriction. That's easy and a simple mechanism without any burden to the database teams.
So Mohammed
Thank you.
asks in the chat, this conversation prompts me to clarify my understanding of encryption versus masking. Encryption is for the whole data versus masking is for column level. I don't think that aligns with my understanding of the chapter where they talk about encryption. They have like 4 major techniques for encryption, and then they talk about masking separately. But others, feel free to jump in and clarify.
I think we're talking about masking here eventually. You want to hide data from certain users, right? And
Yeah.
encrypting and decrypting is more like protecting it while it's on the move, probably. Or when you want to have it invisible to everybody except the one person with the key. With masking data is like shuffling around numbers. There's quite a piece of info in this chapter, actually, right? I think about data masking with masking methods, substitution, shuffling. I think that's could be interesting to you as well.
Yeah, encryption is the previous section before masking.
I don't know why, but I feel like encryption is a type of data masking.
Yeah, but you can also mask part of a phone number, right? Just keep out the
Yeah.
last 3 or 4 digits. And encryption is like making it look so weird that you can't do anything with the data unless you have a key. So that might be the difference there.
Yeah, encryption does seem like a part of masking, but for the purpose of the DMBOK, I don't think that they will ask you which is falling into which, but I will say they have the outline that we've seen every chapter to chapter. So encryption is 1.38, and then they have various types of encryption, and then they go separately. 1.39 is obfuscation, i.e. masking. So just be aware that in this chapter, they consider it to be 2 different things, related, but different. So got to take the test at the end of the day. This is our last study session of this June co-working event. So then we will wrap things up with a quick discussion at the end and go about the rest of our Thursday. So I'll share my screen. All right. Well, yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for coming and for studying Chapter 7. Hopefully, this was a helpful discussion in terms of your preparation for that Certified Data Management Professional Fundamentals level exam, as well as learning stuff that you can use on the job, kind of troubleshooting, encryption versus masking, access levels, things like this. So, any burning questions before we wrap up here? Also, this is a good time to ask if you have any kind of test prep questions about the process of taking the exam online or anything that you feel like would help you be more prepared for sitting down to take the exam.
Hi, my name is Nikita. I honestly, I don't even know where to ask because I literally started reading the DMBOK. I have about 10 years of data quality analytics experience in the industry in healthcare.
Cool.
I literally started reading the data quality chapter and I'm loving it already. But this was my first time looking at the security chapter, which is why I wasn't prepared. So it just took me a while to get my head wrapped around everything. And security is not my forte. But I guess my question would be for the generic exam. So there are two parts to the CDMP. There is a generic exam, which has the percentage divvied up between different chapters. And then there is an opportunity to also take specialist exam. For somebody like me with 10 years of experience, it would make a lot more sense to take one or more specialist exams as well. So first step, just taking a step back, the first part, the generic exam, right? If I were to take it online, it looks like it's a multiple choice question. If you could just give a little bit of overview on how the exam is structured and what it is to be part of an online exam, I think that would be helpful just to level set.
Sure. Yes. So it is a multiple choice exam. There are 100 questions. You have 90 minutes to answer, unless English is your second language, in which case you can buy the ESL version, and then that gives you an additional 20 minutes. So definitely recommend that if that applies to you. It is proctored via this browser called Honor Lock, and it prevents you from opening any other windows. So if you have an ebook copy of the DMBOK, you have to have that on a second device, not a second monitor. That won't work. You have to have a second, like whether it's an iPad or a second laptop or something, not connected to the internet. So that's the first exam. And people typically do really well on this one. You need to get a 60% or greater if that's the only exam you want to take. And then if you want to progress to the specialist level, as you mentioned, you have to take 2 specialist exams. So with 10 years of experience, you would be eligible for what they call the master level of accreditation. Basically, you have to get an 80% on all 3 exams that you take, the fundamentals exam and then the 2 master's exam or the 2 specialist exams. If you get 80% or greater, then you can attain this level of the certification. So hopefully that answers all your questions. If not, let me know.
No, I think that was helpful. Thank you. And sorry, I was trying to hold off on my questions because I'm intending to get certified in another month. Just looking at the book, it looks like a lot of it is theory and whatever you have learned over your job role or just your industry experience. I think as long as you are aware of that, you would just apply, just bringing that knowledge together in this book. I think that's what I've at least noticed in the data quality chapter.
That's good.
Super exciting.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll do very well given your industry experience. The main tip with this exam, since it's open book, is to know how to look things up quickly. And then people do say the specialist exams are more challenging. So you want to be strategic about which ones you select. Like obviously data quality would be a great fit for you. And then you can pick one of the others from the list of 7.
Sounds good. Thanks for hosting this. This was excellent. Great.
Awesome. Yeah, we're over time for anybody who has to go. But if folks have other questions, I can stick around for another couple minutes.
Sorry, just to add on Nikita's question. So Nicole, which one would you recommend? Be it PDF or the hard copy, like from your experience?
Yeah, I used the hard copy and I liked it because that helps me stay organized while I was studying and I didn't get distracted by having the internet. But if you are more diligent and focused and you can use a PDF to study, then that's recommended actually because you can use Control F during the exam.
During the exam, okay.
Yeah. If you have a good PDF browser and you don't mind reading things on your computer, then that's the best way to do it. But I also just don't like reading things online. Like I'll print them out if it's a really long article or something. So it's up to you. Yeah. Thanks for that question. Other questions? Oh, FK says, just a suggestion, use a read aloud feature of Adobe PDF to complete the target reading when it bores you. So that's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, you can make your own audiobook. And I hope that the audio voices are getting better over time, given how AI seems to be making leaps and bounds improvements in this area. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. This was really fun. And hopefully for those of you who are Data Strategy Pros members, I'll see you at the end of the month when we do our guided study session. Otherwise, keep coming to the co-working sessions. So those are the 15th of every month. Thanks, everybody. Eve's asked in the chat, I'll just address this for those of you who have to go. I'll see you later. So we have a membership. That's where we have the recordings of the previous guided study sessions. So the co-working sessions are the ones like today, and those are up on the YouTube channel. And then the guided study sessions are for the community of members. So Eve, hopefully that answers your question. This was great. All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks again for coming.
Bye, Nicole. Thank you.